Please welcome to the stage Executive Vice President and Chief Customer Experience Officer at Comcast Cable, Charlie Heron.
So how do you make CX a permanent part of your company's DNA? How do you get, in our case, 80,000 people to consistently deliver a better experience, the experience customers expect, with all that complexity that Børge talked about in his opening speech, with all the different contact points and channels, et cetera? And ultimately, how do you make sense of what digital transformation might mean for you? And so for us, we call this scaling to one. And as Børge mentioned, we're at a pivot point where we've made good progress, but to take it to the next level, we have a point of view on what digital transformation means, what embedding CX in your organization means, and I'd like to talk to you a little bit about that today. Because my sense is our point of view may be a little bit different than how some of you guys are thinking about it. Our CX journey so far has been good. We've made tremendous progress. You know, one of the core things that we really focused on was how do we drive this into the culture of our business. And so we have 80,000 practitioners of NPS. From the CEO on down to every frontline employee, we all make callbacks, we all do huddles, we all look at the data. We've driven the CX metrics into our P&L, so every month they're discussed and we look to see them improve the same way we would with any of our financials. So I feel pretty good about that we've got culture there. And we, like most CX organizations, focused on a couple of key journeys. For us, that it was the onboarding moment, the move moment, and we made tremendous progress on TNPS, and again, felt pretty good about it. And we invested a lot in employee tools, which was something that we were lacking. And customers have felt it so far. So our social team went from days to 15 minutes in terms of responding to issues. They have the highest TNPS of any of our care contact channels. We took 30% of the effort out of the onboarding experience and drove that NPS multiple double-digit growth. We have 500 stores. We refitted 250 of them, so now they're a place where you go to engage in the product and really get something done and understand your product, not a piece of bulletproof glass where you pay your bill. It's allowed us to launch mobile, which we did since we were last here. And the thing that I'm most proud of and excited for is we'll do about 1.2 million callbacks this year using the Medallia system and really engaging customers. They are feeling it. And as Jason mentioned, you know, it's great empowerment for the employee and the supervisors and the team and the customer to feel like there's a connection there that wasn't there before. But this was all really, really hard work. And there's only so much you can do to improve before you have to fundamentally change things. And that's the moment that we came to last year. About this time in May, we reshifted our organization. We put all the care and the CIO and the CX organizations into the product team. And part of the reason we did that was we came to this realization that we have to fundamentally change the way we do business. So digital transformation was upon us. I don't think of that as an adoption goal. I think, how do I just build it into the way that we do work? This is the interaction model we currently still have. I said had, that's kind of wishful thinking. But it's one that we're working to shift. And if you think about it, you can think of that triangle as effort or personalization. So up front, we kind of get you going. We don't make you do a lot. And by the end, as you go through your journey, if you've had a problem, you're spending a lot of time with our agents. And by the way, we're spending a lot of time training agents and putting stuff in their head that they've got to remember. And the model is just backwards, in my opinion. There are a couple of moments over the summer where I thought of the model and sort of how do we flip it. We did a reliability study on Wi-Fi, and we found that 50 to 60% of our issues were actually in educating the customer about what Wi-Fi can do, what it can't do, what it is, what it isn't. 50 to 60%. So when we did our reliability study, It could have been their phone, it could have been their printer, it could have been their misunderstanding of what 2.4 versus 5 is. And I said, wow, we've got to make the product work a lot harder. Second example I had would be we were sitting and reviewing a feature that we just started to launch called Appointment Waitlist. So if you have to have an install or a technician, we give you a 2-hour window. And what we'd like to do is say, hey, look, this is what we have available for now, but you can sign up for a wait list and get an earlier one. And the team was telling me about all the great work that they were doing, which was great work, but about the module that they were going to build for agents so that they could sign the customer up for this, and then the customer would get an SMS. And the way I view that is, we already give a confirmation of your appointment. On that confirmation should be the opportunity to sign up for that appointment wait list. I don't have to train the agent. I don't have to tell them anything. All I have to tell them is, if I have your mobile number, you're going to get a confirmation and you can sign up for an appointment wait list. So those two instances made me think, and all of us think, well, we've got to really fundamentally rewire how we think about what we build. And so we're really trying to flip the model to something more like this, where we spend a lot more time up front educating the customer and making the product work hard. The reliability is really proactive care, messaging to the customer, seeing those issues before they become issues, putting, we call it moving CX to the left, putting CX into the product design in a fundamentally different way. And so by the time you do get to an agent, the agent only has to worry about this very small sliver of very personalized information that can make sure that they give the right solution to a customer. It's not a list of FAQs. It's like, this is the perfect solution for you, not people that sort of look like you, which is what we're in right now. There's been a little bit of pushback, to be honest, as we're actually on a roadshow right now this month, kind of letting people know what the end state's going to look like. A little bit of pushback because the natural in a company like ours, where people and process have such a heritage, is, well, that means the customer's going to have to do maybe a little more up front. They're going to have to give a little more information about their mobile number, their email. They're going to have to verify things. And that doesn't sound like a good experience. We should just be doing that for them. And I actually don't think that's true. And we've seen, and we've done pilots, that that's not true at all. If you can engage the customer, because if you think about it, customer engagement is effort. It's just effort that's willingly given versus the back end where it may be unwillingly given. And if you can engage that customer up front, you can make this a very personal and different kind of experience. I was most recently reminded of this on Mother's Day because I was thinking to myself, if I had engaged my wife all year long and written down all those things she had said that she was interested in, I'd be having a lot better Sunday morning than I do right now. So we think it's based on three what I consider hallmarks of great CX. One is personalization from the beginning. And again, this is not, we're going to move away from adoption to this is a requirement. The second is proactive. If I know who you are and I know what you have, I can be a lot more proactive about what I offer up to you. And the third is, how do we make this designed and extremely orchestrated? A really good customer experience is well orchestrated and designed to be that way. So let's focus more on the design of the thing, a little less on the recovery when it goes wrong. So I went to the engineers with my colleagues and said, look, our next phase is here. We're going to continue on the continuous improvement program. That's not stopping, but we really want to kind of make a leap forward, and we're going to call this scaling to one. And the engineers were very excited because they said, I'm pretty sure I can build a system that scales to one. And I said, well, I think it's going to be a little bit harder than that. Because at Comcast, we're very good about taking one thing and scaling it to a lot of people. Here's a voice remote. Here's the FAQs on it. Here's the sales brochure. What we're not very good is taking all that data that we have about a customer and scaling it down to that one individual instance. So there's some building blocks to it. The first is what we call identity and a radio. If I know who you are, and I have a very good communication channel, the best communication channel, which is what we call the radio, I can have a very fundamentally different relationship with you. Again, just to kind of highlight sort of the cultural change that this is creating in the company, we were doing proactive callbacks for issues. So we could see some data. We hired a company and had some employees that were calling the customers. And some of you, if you're employee or customers, may have gotten some of these calls. Say, hey, we see an issue. We'd like to roll a truck out and take care of it, or can you do this thing? It's a pretty good program, but I was sitting in these meetings and they were talking about how they were reaching about 30% of the customers when they were calling them. And they were talking about, okay, well, we're going to change our calling hours, you know, and they were talking about optimizing their callback hours. And I said, I think what we should really be talking about is how do we have a communication channel that works 100% of the time? And so the first and foremost thing we're going to be doing is driving very hard at a mobile number is required for the service or a verified email. And then we also are doing it within products. So we have X1, which is our TV product. We have notifications happening on that. We have about 3 million people using our mobile My Account app. We have notifications in that. So that's step one. The next is a project that we started about July of last year. We launched our first AI product in December. And it's really the machine learning and the AI to start to learn from the experience and be the decision engine behind how we're proactive, how we're reaching out to customers. And so we've put that not only into our own product, we've put it into Facebook Messenger, and we're kind of scaling it into all of our products. And the real kind of neat thing about that is it's constantly learning. We're not creating these decision trees of if, this, then statements. It's actually getting into the work that we're doing. So right now, for example, we launched some new wizards for our agents that use this technology that are looking at everything the customer's already done and then making a recommendation versus having you go through these kind of flows, which are frustrating for customers because like, look, I already restarted my modem. Can't you see that? And the answer is, yeah, we can see that, but we weren't giving that to the agent. We are now. And we're seeing 200 seconds less handle time. We're seeing much happier customers because they're not having to repeat things. Fewer what we call avoidable truck rolls and appointments that were sent that didn't need to be. And so it's really proving out in financial ways as well as customer experience ways. So once you have the decision engine and a way to talk to a customer, then you can have what we call the CX layer, which is for us the two-way dialogue. And we're putting that, we have a stated goal from my boss, the CTO, to put that in all of our products. Because my point of view is the customer service is what happens when the experience breaks. If the experience breaks in the product, you should only be one click away from help. And so we're putting this CX layer into the product itself. So that's the automated piece. And then we're also building this context layer. So you can see a lot of this is built on really clean data, and it's really an important part of your CX program. But the context layer is the handoff to the human. It's the focus on the relationship. It's how do I set you up next time? There's history, there's transparency, you know what you're expected to do, we know what we're expected to do. That is the context layer. And just a couple of screenshots of what it's starting to look like. So the first is, it's on an app. This could have been an X1 screen, but the notion is it's personalized to you. In this case, I don't know if you can read it. It says a Wi-Fi camera is not working. It's proactive, and we're reaching out. We think that's a very fundamentally different interaction with customers than we've ever had before. On the AI and the ML, it's the one telling us what we should be doing on the proactive notifications. It's looking at all the machine data. It's looking at some of the context and saying, hey, reach out here. And this notion that CX is always built into the product and always monitoring for the customer. Then the actual two-way dialogue. Once you engage with it, and it's always present, always there, you can ask it anything. You can follow the directions of what it's suggesting. But the idea that even without human involvement yet, you can have this dialogue with what's going on. And what I like about this is how we drive a lot more consistency in what customers feel, hear, and do when they do have an issue or a question. This is the same dialogue that happens in the IVR, that happens on the agent screens, that happens in the product. There's a big difference between looks the same and is the same. Looks the same means you have multiple development teams trying to make things look the same. But what you find is inevitably they're looking at different data. So we've spent the last year really focusing on this data lake and the team that's driving this so that it is literally the same. Because then the feedback loop is there and it's learning the same way. The other thing you might see there is this consistent game plan. This notion of you have an issue, we're going to solve it in these 3 steps. The first being, let's run a diagnostic. So again, when I look at our business, there was no consistent game plan. It was all sort of what you knew in your job function, how you might, and what you had access to in terms of tools, how you might approach that. So we're saying, no, there's going to be a consistent game plan for all of this. And then, by the way, when we do close the loop with the customer, in the context layer, in this case saying, hey, look, it looks like you need a pod extension to your Wi-Fi, that goes into a transparent notes database, essentially. The customer gets the close the loop email. We get the starting point for the next interaction that might happen. So it's this notion of a feed or a stream. And this is really focused on the relationship. So this is where you'd be saying, you might ask your NPS question. You might follow up and say, do you have any other questions? And again, you can kind of hand it back into the automated dialogue at that point. There's sort of a belief, I think, that, again, digital transformation for many is how do I take this thing that I'm doing in a call center or in an analog way and I make it digital on a website. It's still, in my mind, not baking it into the experience itself. And there's also this notion that digital transformation is either human or machine. And I don't think that's right either. The real magic of all of this is that human-digital handoff and what we understand and how do we use that data to make smarter discussions happen when we talk to our customers. So really some early data. Here we go, last slide. Some really early data on how it's going. So again, we launched the AI engine in December. We can cover about 200 intents. It's learning every week. And we've had, depending on the interaction, between a 14 and 30% agent call reduction for customers that are interacting with it, meaning they're getting answers for the simple things and saving the harder questions for people. On the two-way dialogue, part of our two-way dialogue is this notion of orchestrated SMS or notifications to the customer, the information they need at that time. And a year ago, we hadn't sent any. Essentially, we're doing about 50 million, about 10 million a month, as we ramp up the types of journeys that we're putting in. And we're not spamming customers in the sense that we're really seeing TNPS lifts, anywhere from 20 points, this one, to 40 in the case of our moves journey. So just, again, this is a lot about customer expectations and education and being there for them when they have questions. And then the last piece is on the identity and radio piece. This is maybe for some of you that are looking at something similar. We ran tests because everyone was nervous about all this extra effort. Customers weren't going to want to give us information. And we found that 80% were already opting in, and 10 percentage points of that were because of technical issues. So essentially 90+% are willingly there. And so that was really important because it gave us the confidence to go back to the business and say, we can do this. We can fundamentally shift and change the mindset of an agent from, I need to do this for you, to, I can show you how you can do this. And by the way, when you do that, you have more choice, control, your data is more secure, et cetera. And customers are loving it. And we're finding, again, that it's 2 to 3 times more effective than previous reach methods that we wanted to do. So that's what I had for you today. I really appreciate the opportunity. Again, for us, it's a fundamental shift in how we put CX into the product in a different way. It has a lot of change management and employee impact and potential. But we feel like that's when we're going to go really digital, is when it's just the only way that we do business. So thank you for your time.
That is amazing, amazing. Congratulations.
Thank you.
And so we talked briefly about this this out there. You guys have been at this for 3 years now.
Yeah, the whole CX journey, yep.
How at what point do you feel like you're sort of, it's not a big project anymore. It's kind of where this is where we operate. This is where we are.
Well, I mean, we're definitely, it is embedded in the organization that this is what we do.
Yep.
And we've got a long ways to go, and we're super humble about that. But this next phase was really about, okay, how do we actually change the way we think about things so that it's truly how we operate, and it's not a pure manpower issue. I'm so happy with the way things have gone with NPS and the Medallia support on that, because those are the moments that lift everyone's spirits, and again, customers can feel that. So from the bottom to the top, that commitment to NPS and that commitment to CX and engaging with customers is, I think, what's fundamentally changed in the 3 years.
You have about 80,000 employees.
Mm.
You said early on in your presentation here, very early on, you really leaned in on culture.
Yeah.
I'd love to hear kind of how you thought about that at the time. I mean, 80,000 employees and a company that's very operationally focused. Mm-hmm. Sort of how do you think about transitioning that to something that's more customer-centric?
Yeah, and I talked a little bit about one of the companies here, Zurich, about this yesterday, is we did a top and bottoms approach. So top-down, CEO mandate, not a shiny object project, really focused and was very visible, built into our core operating principles, et cetera. And then from the ground up, we focused on, in the NPS deployment, we focused as much on the elevations and the employee aspects of NPS as the actual score itself. Yep. So that notion that they have a voice that the senior team is obligated to respond to is really critical. So we handle 90% of our top 25 elevations within 90 days. And we get back to, and we knock them down, we get back to the employees. And I think that's really created this groundswell of a cultural change for us.
Where would you, if you faced any resistance, what was the toughest part to overcome?
Yeah, it was really in the management layer. Everyone says, yeah. The front line is like, you don't have to do any convincing, right? They're ready, and if you listen to, if I did anything differently, I would have listened to them and focused more on employees and tools than I did maybe on journeys and things like that, because they're ready. It's the senior team and the supervisors and things like that. It's not that they resist, but they're given a framework to work in that maybe doesn't have the latitude to adjust. Right. So we were saying backstage, we'd rather write a rule than manage outliers. Right. And I think that's what you have to really get to, because in this day and age, especially with social the way it is, you have to empower that front line to be very agile and make the right decision, not follow the right rule. So it's really been at that kind of mid-management layer.
So what I think is really interesting about specifically where you guys are going is it's almost like you lift what you've got and really drive a much more customer-centric approach. But then what you want to do is to productize it, essentially automate it, making it less dependent on humans when it's not necessary.
That's right.
And I think that's very interesting. I guess one question that I would have for you is, what about the grandmothers? What about my mother? My father too. He's worse, by the way. Yeah. How's it going to work for them?
It's going pretty well, which is part of the reason we did those tests, because we have a lot of folks that cite these corner cases and try to make it, be the norm. And the guy that runs contact centers for me, Tom Karinchak, he's like, I can't wait to meet these 100 million grandmothers that are keeping us from making progress. And the truth of the matter is, they're pretty digital, fastest growing group on many of the social nets. But you're right, you do have to productize it. And when you productize it, I think you take down some of those walls of resistance, because it's just part of how they get the product. So we've told our designers, for example, and our product guys that when we do a self-install, there is no call center. So how would you build that product as if a call center did not exist? It changes a lot of, in other words, this CX isn't just about a contact care or a a support function. It's about the entire way you do your business and what you expect all the way through. And so we're making them work harder so that our employees can be more successful on the questions that really matter. And to your point, the generational things, you have to have escape paths, but it's not nearly as big of as an issue as people will make it out to be.
Very good.
Yeah.
Thank you very
Great.
much. Thank you very much,
Appreciate being
Charlie.
here. Thank you.
All right.